Welcome to Shilpa. I'm delighted to be talking with Shilpa today. Shilpa is a homeschool mum of two lovely boys. She has a background in nutrition, suicide prevention workshops in New Zealand, and she's lived in 5 countries. So there's a lot of life experience in there that has brought you to where you are. However, today, Shilpa, we're going to focus on finances in homeschooling. Last week, I put out a notice on my chat groups on Telegram, which includes New Zealand, Australia, the US, and international, we'll say, asking for help because I'd had a conversation with a friend last week. And she said, it's not the same as it was for us, Christine, when we were homeschooling 20 years ago. Things have changed. People can't afford it now. And I said to her, I have issue with the word can't. I think in most cases there's always a way. And we had to agree to disagree, which was interesting. But I thought, I'm going to go and ask. I'm going to go to the coalface where these families are, and I'm going to ask. The responses I got blew me away, actually. But anyway,
I
that's
bet.
probably jumping slightly ahead, Shilpa. Welcome to you. I'm so pleased you've said yes to come and give me some input on your own experiences.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm quite excited and I'm really happy to do this interview.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, let's just cut straight to the nitty-gritty then, shall we? It seems to me that going from the response I had, this is an important subject for homeschooling families, both those who are seriously considering it and troubled by how are we going to afford it? We've got two incomes and we need everything. Life is expensive. And also the homeschool families who are already homeschooling know what it's like to be living somewhat frugally, but they're a bit worried because we've just started what is looking like a recession. People are starting to lose their jobs. It's a changing world out there. So that's the families that we're thinking of today when we start talking about it. Perhaps you could just start off. What's your basic instinct response, Shilpa, when you have got a family who's going, oh, I don't think we can afford this. What do I do? What would you say?
Well, I usually tell them it's often very possible. Sure, you will have exceptions to the rule. I have personally, so over COVID and the mandates, I spoke with anywhere between 5 and 10 parents a week for about for about a year and a half. So possibly even longer, but I was speaking with a lot of parents. It's actually why I started running Zoom um, meetings instead, because there were just so many people wanting help. And finance was something that came up with a lot of parents for more than one reason. We've kind of come into, I guess, a period of time where both parents work. That's the norm. And it's kind of considered odd if you stay home. And we've also gotten used to the luxuries that come with, and I say luxuries loosely because obviously each family have their own income, but we've become accustomed to two incomes. And when I chose to home educate over 10 years ago now, we made a conscious decision to cut one income and live a different lifestyle. So, and I do understand that's actually a very hard viewpoint. It's a hard shift, actually. You know, you have to really want something to make it happen. So it's like with anything, right? If you really want something, it doesn't matter what stands in the way, you will make it happen. There could be a concert that's happening that's once in a lifetime and you've always wanted to go, you'll make it happen. It's very likely you will anyway. So it's kind of the same. And over the last few years, so prior to COVID, I spoke with parents as you do. This never really came up that much. Over the last few years, because I've helped so many parents, it is something that's come up. I've had parents call me in tears because a lot of the ideas they got about the expense of home education actually came from outside. So they were seeing adverts for all these classes and all these things. And because they've just come out of the school system, and to be fair, we were all put through the school system, or most of us were. I do know adults who were home educated, but most of us went through the school system. So, and we've all been programmed to look at education through that lens. So even when I came out, when I pulled my children out of school, I had the same thing. Oh my gosh, what about this? What about that? They're going to miss out on this. What about, oh, all the other children are doing this, and this is what children are supposed to do because this is what you do in school. And I didn't even know that many families who were home educating. We just had a small group. So I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at the school system as a whole. And it drives you mental because it's FOMO, fear of missing out. You think you have to do this because everyone else is doing it. You have to. I had family members telling me I was not doing enough. So it came from everywhere. So 10 years ago, we had a similar pressure for different reasons. I had family members telling me, oh, well, they're not getting, a good enough education. You're not taking them to this. You're not taking them to that. That costs money. All of it costs money. So we had to, at some point, sit back and evaluate what we were doing with our children and decided, hey, you know what? For every one thing they don't do, there's something else they are doing. And for everything they are doing, there are thousands of things that they're not doing, actually. So they're getting an education based on what we can afford, what we need, what we would like them to learn, and what's available to us. So fast forward to now, and I've had parents come to me and say, well, I don't think I can home educate because it's too expensive. And then when I dig a little bit and ask them, well, what is it that's too expensive? They give me a list of all these classes that they're seeing and activities, and they'll have, some of them have 3 or 4 kids, and they go, I can't do that. I can't. And I said, and I've said to all of them, okay, so you don't have to send your kids to all of those. Number one. Number two, why don't you set up a group and swap skills? I've actually set up 3 or 4 groups like that over the last 5 years, where we just had a group of parents and I'd run it happily. And then I would say, if a parent offered something, I'd say, hey, that's great. Do you want to run that? Fantastic. Another parent would offer something, another parent, and it would grow organically like that. And it didn't cost us anything other than our time. And sure, sometimes if you want to do an activity that might cost a little bit of, a little bit for ingredients, or a little bit for printing, or a little bit for this, again, that's up to you if you wish to include that. So that's one way that we used to do it. And the other thing that I've spoken to parents about is not necessarily listening to all the classes that they're hearing about outside of the home education community. Because what I noticed is that, over COVID, a lot of people who were not home educators started offering classes. And they were really expensive. And I was actually quite shocked because I've never paid that much money for my children, ever. Other than when they needed to do something for NCEA, GCSE level, and it was a specialist that I needed. Then I paid a little bit more, and even then it didn't come up to that much, comparatively. So I've had single mums and single dads who I've spoken with, and I've had single mothers who've said, look, I don't know how I can home educate. I've got to work. But when I sat down with them, barring maybe one person, when I sat down with these parents over the phone or in person and gone over their schedule, gone over their work schedule, gone over what's possible, what's not possible, what they can do with the child, what they can't do with the child, we've worked out a plan. Okay, so you can have your kid here on these days at home, and when you go to work, maybe you can send them to a friend, or you find another parent who's a single parent, or even a family, and swap kids for the 2 days where maybe you're not at home and you can't do it. There are thousands of ways you can solve the problem. It's right. Again, it comes down to willingness. Because if you're willing, where there's a will, there's a way. You'll find the way.
Yeah. So the first thing, So the first thing, if we were going to just go back over that, the very first thing parents have to do is decide they want to homeschool.
I
right?
think so, personally.
Yes. And then it's that immediate question comes up, but I can't afford to, but I still want to. Okay, now we know you want to, and you're not just going, might be nice. What are you prepared to do to make that happen? Now we get into the weeds of all of that. So when I
Yes.
sent out the message the other day, it was after I said I spoke to my friend, and I just quickly put down a few little points, and I'll just run over them and see if we can bounce off those. The very first one I wrote
Yeah.
down was, what sacrifices do you make or are you prepared to make? And you referred a little bit earlier about things that we regard as normal, but really they're luxuries. There's actually a lot we can do without for a good reason. um, Working part-time, can you say your husband, let's assume he's the main income, can there be an upgrading in his income ability? There's that possibility. Do you have help from grandparents, either financial or time, so that you can do part-time work? Are you willing to get financial advice and tips? And also, are you willing to actually hear something that you don't want to hear? Would go into that. Are you willing to sell down or move away? And they were just some instant thoughts I had come in. So I think
I actually applied a lot of those. So
sorry, say that again.
actually everything you've mentioned, I've applied those things you actually mentioned. We went through that, all of it.
What was it like going through that, Shilpa? Without getting too personal, just choose what you can and can't say here, so that people know that when they are going through that panic or that stubbornness or the, oh, I don't want to, what's it actually like moving through it?
It's hard. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It's not easy, but I don't know anything in life that's worthwhile that's easy, at the beginning. So yes, it's been hard. There were times where, so my other half is actually English and he isn't a Kiwi. So when he came here, because we came back to New Zealand, I've lived in 5 countries, and I came back to New Zealand with my family 7 years ago. He struggled to get a job. He's got a fantastic, like, he's very highly qualified. He still struggled to find a job because he's not Kiwi. And so it was very interesting. We had to downgrade our pay quite a bit just to get him work. So we struggled. I mean, he's a mathematician. He has a master's in maths. He's worked in the insurance industry. He's a software engineer. You'd think he could have gotten work quite easily. No. So he had to downgrade. And I actually have spoken to other people who are foreign, and they've said the same thing. You have to downgrade. So we had to downgrade his pay. We went without a lot of things. My kids didn't go for classes at the beginning, actually. And to be honest, we actually sat back at one point and went, hold on, we just took our kids out of school. Why are we putting them into classes? That defeats the whole point of what we're trying to do here. So we realized we didn't need classes anyway. It was great for them to go hang out with other people and maybe go to something that someone else ran as opposed to a class, if that makes any sense, not going for a different purpose. But at the beginning, we didn't spend money on sending them anywhere. I did stuff at home. They had friends. We hung out. It was all free, other than travel. Everything was free. And yeah, you sacrifice. I didn't buy new clothes. I actually probably still don't buy new clothes, really. You don't. You give up a lot of things. But I have sane children at the end of it, and that's actually what I care about. We've been through rough times in many ways, not just financial. You do. It's a family. You go through rough periods, and sometimes that includes financial. Yes, and the upgrading of the pay. Like, do you want me to get into that?
If you feel comfortable with that, sure.
Yeah, so we did that. Let me think. What did we do? So one of the things is I actually years ago tried to get him out of the insurance industry to program, because I know he's very good at it and he loved it. And the reason I did is because I had a lot of friends who were programmers and a lot of them worked from home. And this was pre-COVID. So I thought, well, if we're home educating, I'd love to have you home, particularly because he's a mathematician, sneak in some maths and science there. And we were working on that anyway. And then COVID hit and, everyone was working from home. So that did help. And then I helped him. network. I helped him find new jobs. I actually helped him get job interviews. I've actually helped him get job interviews probably since we've met, because that's my forte, is I'm very good at that. Obviously, other people have different fortes. But again, I would work with him on, okay, how can we upgrade the income without me having to go to work? What can we do? Now my children are teenagers. They go to work and they pay for they've been paying for some of their educational fees for a while. So there are many ways that you can upgrade the pay. There's no reason why the kids can't contribute. In fact, it's built their character now. They're really proud of it.
Yes, life costs money, doesn't it? And the sooner they can take some kind of responsibility for finances and learn the value that time equals money, and you need to choose what to do with that. I worked this long. Do I really want to spend my money on, maybe a big night out with my friends regularly? I'm not saying irregularly, because it took me that long to earn that money. Is that actually what I want? So it's
Yes.
actually good for them. Yes, good for their values.
I mean, it's very good. And we discussed with them that, hey, they should be contributing towards the family, actually, because there are a lot of costs. I have boys, they eat a lot. They have activities they do. There's a lot of things that we provide for them. Where could they contribute? So when they started earning money, let me think, probably 5 years ago, it was small amounts, but we helped them look at investing their money. We helped them look at saving some of it, and some of it going to what they wanted, and some of the savings went to their education. So that way, they did a class or an activity that they wanted to do, and they paid for it. And maybe some parents in this day and age might think that's really wrong, but what I've noticed, because my kids are now in their mid-teens, they actually have a lot of pride in the things they're contributing their money towards, and they're actually really glad that they can help dad.
They're taking responsibility. I think one of the things we've mentioned before, Shilpa, and we've alluded to it today, is a worldview and a different way of living. When you choose to homeschool, you're automatically entering like almost a parallel universe. You've become a contrarian. So it follows that eventually you end up doing quite a lot of other things in a contrarian manner. Now, why should it be that helping to contribute to household expenses is viewed as so wrong these days? Because that's the way families have actually done this for millennia. I was just thinking back through that, and I know my husband's father, when he was a young boy, had to leave school early after his father died and go out to work and help support the family. That was normal.
Yes.
And why is it not considered normal now? That's an interesting thing to have to think about. I'm not looking to answer that today. I'm just observing of how society's expectations change.
Yes. Well, because I come from an Indian background, my parents are Indian. There are a lot of Indian values that I grew up with. And to be fair, because I grew up in New Zealand, I kind of ran away from a lot of the Indian values, thinking, oh, my friends are all, again, this is the school system, right? Oh, my friends do X and my parents do Y. I love the fact that my friends could do this and my parents would, and I didn't like what my parents were telling me. So I kind of ran away from those values. And it's obviously, you have kids, things change. You start to see what your parents were doing was correct. But more than that, I actually started to see a shift in things after COVID, where communities were starting to come together more, families were starting to come together more. I was hearing more about children living at home because they couldn't afford it. And I thought, well, kind of makes sense. And that's what they did in India. And, you lived with your grandparents and you contributed to the family home. And it wasn't this whole individualistic me. I'm going to earn money and it's just for me. It was, no, I'm going to actually contribute and make the place I'm living in a better place, and make myself better, contribute towards my own self-improvement and my own growth, rather than just to go out partying, as you say.
And I think it's interesting because I have observed that in other cultures, and I think there is a lot of sense and practicality to that. But what we're observing now, especially in the European Pākehā type culture, is that you're getting kids staying at home longer and longer, but it's still mum and dad paying for everything. And she's
Yeah, there's
still
no
doing their
contribution.
washing and
Yeah.
How is that good? That's a completely different topic, of course, but I'm just kind of drawing that because that's what you mentioned about your experience within Indian culture. So I think there is something there to go, hey, there is this. Parents,
Yes,
please absorb this, and we're going to revisit this another day, because that actually matters a lot too. Because what we're wanting to teach our kids is not only um, not what to think, but how to think. But in our family, our priority was we wanted to grow them into responsible young adults who will go out and they'll
yes,
be a blessing to the world. So if you're
yes,
still doing everything for them, you're still paying everything for them, we would not have been fulfilling that objective within what are we trying to produce and grow our young ones up into being the young adults. It's take responsibility, because one day you are going to have to
yes.
take responsibility for a family, and you're going to look back and thank us because you'll know how to do it.
Yes, actually, I'm in total agreement. My kids now, they cook for us. They cook, they clean, they do the groceries. I actually have to turn to my son when we go grocery shopping, go, do we need this? Because I've passed it on to them. They actually do most of the cooking through the week. They take
Okay.
care of their breakfast, lunch, and the family's lunch, the family's dinner, and they're very proud of it now. And obviously, there were points where they grumbled, and I pushed them through it, and they're out the other end, and they're like, it's very interesting. They're very proud of it because other people hear it and they go, yeah, I do the cooking and they do the grocery shopping. And, and I at one point, again, a Western viewpoint, I thought, oh gosh, am I doing the wrong thing here? Am I overburdening my kids? Now I'm looking at it in their mid-teens. No, they've actually grown from it and they're very proud of themselves. And I know that if they went off on their own now, they'd be fine. They can earn money, they can cook, they can clean, they can study, they can learn stuff. As you say, you're trying to raise them to be responsible adults who can go out in the world and actually survive and thrive.
Yes, thrive. And just to finish off that thought, there is that one day you're going to have some daughters-in-law who are going to be so grateful to you and your husband. All right.
I
So
have thought of that too.
okay. All right, so let's pretend we've got a pretend family here, which have played out in reality, but we're dealing with a family who have decided they want to homeschool, but they're really afraid and they actually don't know what to do. What would be some of the first things you're saying you need to look at in order to say, let's baby step our way through all of the things you need to change? What have you
Okay.
talked to? Literally, give me a list, please, because that's what people want to hear. What are the things they need to look at one by one and go, let me reassess this?
Okay. First of all, I'd find out what their concern is. What is it that makes them feel they can't home educate? Is it money? And if so, you know, I have sat with parents and actually gone into the nitty-gritty on it and asked them, what the rent is, what are your expenses? Because there's always somewhere you can either cut down or improve what you're doing work-wise. So there's somewhere something can change. Like there's a it's going back to what you said, that it's the saying can't. I have a problem with that too. I've, you know, been through periods where life was tough and home educating with one income was very tough. And moving countries while home educating was worse because you spend so much money moving countries that you actually lose out a lot. Not to mention the fact you don't now have your, friends down the road, your family down the road who can look after the, like, you don't have the setup. So I know that if you sat down and looked at it, it is possible. And so I would first of all ask them why, what specifically makes them feel that they can't afford it. And that's probably where I would start. It's hard to answer that question because it's so individual. Each person I've spoken with has been a completely different conversation. I spoke with a woman, I've spoken with people who don't want to give up television, who don't want to, oh, but I don't really want to home educate my kids. So it comes down to not finances, there's something else there, right? Oh, I don't really want to give up my TV. I really want to I don't really want to hang, spend all my time with my kids. And then when I talk to them about um, what they want, how they see their kids, what is it about their kids that they find so frustrating? Oh, well, they're really young and they're running around all over the place, and I just can't get a break. Or, I've got this child who's constantly pestering me with questions, whatever it is. I give them another viewpoint. And often it's really good. I've actually had a lot of families come to meet me personally. And they've met my kids, and my kids will sit down and hang out with them and play with their kids. And they go, "Oh, that's not a normal teenager. That's not what children are like." And I go, "Well, my kids were going in a different direction till I pulled, well, yeah, one of them at least was going in a different direction till I pulled them out of school." And yeah, we've been through the mill. It hasn't been plain sailing. It never is. You're going to have days where you're pulling your hair out or you're crying and everything's going wrong and you don't know what to do. And you feel like one term you've overdone the activities and the next term you haven't done enough. And then the next term you want to do more. And the next term you want to do like it is a little bit psychotic in that respect. But you eventually come to a point where you have balance and you work it out. But and the reason I'm getting into this is because every parent comes with a different set of problems. And it isn't always financial, even though some of them say it's financial. It isn't. It's the willingness. And the willingness comes from, again, things like, well, I don't really want to hang out with my kids. My kids drive me nuts in the holidays. But they're different age. I've got a baby and I've got a 12-year-old, completely big age, very big age gap. How am I going to do that? So there's a back off, there's an unwillingness. And so when I've helped parents and talked them through it and explain how it could be done with their particular children, with their circumstances, whether it's, the husband isn't in full agreement with it, or there isn't a husband, or one of the kids doesn't want to come out of school, or there is a child who is a little bit more difficult, whatever the circumstances. Once I've talked them through their particular circumstance, and it's actually easier if I've met the kids because then I can see, a lot of the parents turn around and go, "Oh, I think I can do it." And then once they say, "Oh, I think I can do it," suddenly the barriers start to dissolve. They're not, I mean, I'm not saying they don't exist. Of course they do. But it's easier because now you're willing to overcome them. So I don't know if I answered your question correctly, but it's really hard because everyone has a different set of circumstances.
Yes, and you've got quite a wide experience of parents who have come to see you, so you've got a unique insight. You've actually got the lab experiment, if you like, of all of this evidence before you, and you're collating it into, well, what are the common denominators? They might say this, but actually underneath it, there's this other reason that's popping up. So you definitely can't separate a philosophy of homeschooling from the nitty-gritty of how are we going to afford it. And you've already suggested it, but you said like one day it does fall into balance. And I think that's probably one of the most reassuring things to tell parents is that, yes, it's normal to have days where you're crying and you're full of self-doubt and you're wondering, am I ruining my children? That's normal. Once you know that's
Absolutely.
normal,
Absolutely.
once you know that's
Yes.
normal, it's a huge stress reliever because now you can just go back to, okay, so that's normal, that's reality. I just need to get on with my day then, don't I? There's nothing wrong at all. It's
Yes.
just a day.
Absolutely. And just to add to that, what was really funny was I ran a Zoom meetup every week for a year. And it was almost exactly a year I ran it. And I didn't want to have just me on it because obviously this is one viewpoint. I wanted to have other viewpoints. So I usually had anywhere between 4 to 6 other parents on the call, mums, dads, but generally long-term home educators, 5 years plus. And what I found really reassuring for me personally, which was fascinating, was that we all had similar experiences, completely different experiences, but the underlying thing was the same. Like you just said, it all falls into balance. We all have bad days. And I just went, oh my gosh, it's not just me. So me running these Zooms was fantastic for me personally. And I'm sure I actually think it was for these other mothers too, because we suddenly went, oh, it's not just us. We've never really needed to discuss this before with each other. But helping other parents, we discovered it. And then other parents listening to us went, oh, okay, so you guys have been doing this a long time and you go through rough periods. Absolutely. But like, it does at some point fall into place. It's just unfortunately not necessarily, a year or two after you've started. It does take some time and it depends on you and your kids, but it does happen.
Yes. So getting down into some nitty gritty, because when someone would say to me just generally, well, yes, you can afford it. You've just got to simply look at your household expenses. That's too broad, too general a statement. So people like me actually needed to know, here are some ideas of things that you can look at. I would suggest that the first success, if you like, for finance and thinking that you can't afford this, or you actually are really struggling and looking for ways to financially do better, is that just taking that first step forward and not trying to explore every single way that you can save a bit of money. I think that's going to have to do a lot with mental health too. You don't want to overwhelm yourself. So some really big areas would be probably accommodation, food, transport, obviously schooling curriculum, and we'll call it other for now. So with each of those, have you got
Can
another?
I interrupt you on the curriculum bit? Because
Yep.
we did a lot of that for free and we got a lot of resources for free
Yes,
on the curriculum.
absolutely.
I did a lot for nothing.
Yes.
You can find so much out there that doesn't cost.
Yeah. And that's a big relief also. You don't have to buy a box curriculum. So we can do, well, let's sit on that one for a while. Let's explore that. So you've said you've done a lot for free. Were you feeling like you should be buying a box curriculum right from the start, or did you realize, oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, no, I did. I come from an Indian background. I have relatives who went to top universities. They are high flyers. And it's a bit eccentric in the Indian community to home educate. Like that's just not a thing. You go to school. They came from a culture where to get out of poverty, not necessarily every Indian, but the general culture, to get out of, to ensure you can survive, you have to be educated. So people are very highly educated there. And, your parents come over from India expecting you to get a good education. So I'm now pulling my children out of school. That caused a massive problem at home for me. When I say at home, my family. So I guess in response to that, reacted with, oh my gosh, I have to make sure my kids still kind of follow the norm, if you will. They have to do the exam, they have to follow the curriculum, do the exams, and go to university, and da 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 da. And I got a lot of stick from my family as well for it. So it is what it is. I think now they have turned around and they've seen what my kids are like, and they've gone, oh well, actually, home education clearly does work. So yes, originally I was the one that was actually panicking rather than my other half. And like I say, he's actually the academic. I expected him to be pushing that more. He's the one that told me to take a step back and go, look, hey, they're not, it's okay. They're not going to die if they're not doing X, Y, Z. And, so I've got books that I have bought that we've never used. The workbooks and things like that, thinking, I'm going to make them. And actually, I ended up unschooling my kids. I just didn't know that actually that was the term for it. We just did what seemed the most logical given our circumstances and how the kids responded. And trying to force them into school outside of school, which is why I actually call it home education, because I find it's to get away from that mental view that it's schooling at home.
Yes, there's a
So
difference.
that's why I say yes, and that's why I actually say home education. Because it is for me not school, it is education. So or learning. So yeah, we did that and then we didn't. We've changed. We came out of it, and at one point, we'd go to the library a lot, and at one point my kids just started gravitating towards subjects of their own. I hadn't even introduced them to the subjects. Said find them at the library. One son wanted to do marine biology. I would never have thought of marine biology. The other son wants to study Latin. I have no idea where that came from. Um, and if they were at school, there isn't. I don't think you can do marine biology at school as a teenager, at least. And Latin, only specific schools teach that, like I think the Cambridge ones. So yeah, that was when we started looking at textbooks again, was when they really grabbed onto something when they were 13 or 14, when, oh, I really want to learn this. I really want to learn that. And prior to that, we just dropped it all, actually. And I was petrified, actually. I was petrified
I'm
that
so
my
pleased
kids
to
were going
hear
to
you
turn
say
up.
that.
I was I was petrified the
Yes.
entire way through.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. What's going to happen? What's going to happen to my children? Are they going to be, what are my family going to say? Are they going to make it? Do they have, what's going to happen when it comes to exams? Um, Luckily I had Richard, who is the total opposite of me, very calm, very English, and just would always make me take a step back. And it's always good to have someone like that. It doesn't have to be your husband, it could be someone else, just someone to make you take a step back and go, hey, look, how are they doing? Have they progressed? And taking a look at where they're actually heading. Do they really need to be doing XYZ that you think that they should be doing? Oh, because everyone else is doing it, or because this is what they did in school, or because there's nothing else you can think of.
That kind of reminds me that it's very important to tell home educating families that are doing things a different way. You have entered a contrarian space. Expect
Yes.
pushback, expect reactions of all kinds. And I've done a podcast on this, so I'm not going to do it in detail, but go and find the podcast that talks about how to surround yourselves with people that are going to support you and how to close down people who really do care about you, but they're interfering, how to practically do that. Because it's very important.
I think that.
Yeah. You need support for the decision you've made. And if you're going to have people coming in and going, just simply, how are you going to afford this, is going to undermine not only your initial decision, but your confidence in how you're going about it. Because I also found that your choices that you make in your own family, even the frugal ones, they start manifesting as they become like judgments upon other people, not by your doing, by their choice of seeing your decisions as a reflection on their ones. So that's another thing to watch out for. Surround yourselves with people that understand, because they've walked this path and they're going to support you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I jump in on that, actually?
Yes, please.
That was probably the roughest thing for me. You really do really start growing a thick skin, actually. I started home educating in England, where the culture is very, very different. I'm not British. I'm from here. So I struggled to deal with the mentality that I ran across in England when I started home educating. And I lived in a little village, so everyone people will come up and talk to you in a small village. And I genuinely had random strangers coming up to me in the middle of the day demanding to know why my children were not in school. Usually old ladies, but not always actually. I mean, in fairness, they were well-meaning. You can see they were well-meaning, but that's the culture there, right? That, well, your child needs to be in school. It's illegal. Why is your child not in school? You're walking around and they seem perfectly fine. They're not sick. So I had to deal with a lot of hostility when I was in England of why are your children in school? They're going to be very stupid and they're not doing this and they're missing out on friends and and this is from random strangers, let alone my own family and friends who I knew. I had that as well from family and friends. And when I came to New Zealand, it was such a relief. Oh my gosh. I'd walk down the street, okay, or I would meet strangers and they'd be curious. They wouldn't demand to know. Or if I mentioned, oh, my kids aren't in school, they're home educated, I wouldn't get, why are you doing that? Do you know that that's very bad for your child? I'd get, oh, how does that work then? That was generally what I got here. So it was so lovely to have that difference but the reason I'm mentioning this is because pushback. You get a lot of pushback. I had teachers in my family. So what I found, and I found this with other people, other parents I've spoken with, that often, not always, but often the teachers get quite invalidated. Well, I did a master's in education and I spent X number of years studying that and I'm fully qualified to teach. How are you capable of teaching? You know, they wouldn't necessarily talk to you like that, but that was what was there in the back of their mind, that, you know, you're not qualified to teach. And I actually had a great line for that one. My sister is a teacher and one of her best friends is a teacher. And I think she wanted to calm my sister down. And so she said, you know what, Shilpa? I'm qualified to teach 30 kids. I'm pretty sure you can deal with 2.
Oh, that's lovely.
I thought that was really nice way of handling it, because my sister would get quite, you know, well, you know, you can't be doing it right. And I had, you know, my kids would go to my parents' house and everybody in the family would sit down and do some studying with my children, thinking my kids were missing out. I had neighbors do that actually, thinking my children were missing out. And obviously, don't take that badly. Say thank you, move on, go, that was absolutely fabulous. Thanks very much for actually helping my kids, you know, because it takes a village to raise a child. But yeah, the finances was one thing. You know, I would get asked by my family, why haven't you got a new car? You know, when are you getting a new car? And for me, it was, well, I'm putting my money into my children's education, actually. I'm not interested in a new car. I stopped buying new clothes. We just changed our lifestyle. Didn't go on holiday so much, if at all, actually. You know, we didn't go on holiday so much back then. Things have changed now, but back then, particularly when you're starting out and you're younger, it's harder. So we gave up a lot of things to make it work.
So what did you do, Shilpa, when you had those days where you just started feeling a little bit sorry for yourself? You were getting a bit over the having to go to op shops for your clothes or having a staycation at home. How did you cope with that for yourself?
I don't think I ever had to. I'm a little unusual in that I just adapt very, very fast. Like, I was sent to boarding school at the age of 11. I got over it fast. You know, the fact I was in shock and I didn't like it at first. I just learned to adapt to my new environment. That's how I've always been. And I try to teach that to my kids. Same with, you know, we moved country. A lot of people say, oh my gosh, but, you know, you lose all your friends. Okay, make new ones. You learn to adapt. And it's a great skill to learn as a parent of children, because you want your kids to learn how to be adaptable and flexible. So start with yourself. I've never gone, oh my gosh, I can't buy new clothes. Oh my gosh, I can't go on holiday. We just made our holidays here. To be honest, we don't need holidays because we get to see each other all the time, every day. And then we'll do cool, cute little things. Like, I think at New Year, what did we do? We made homemade pasta and homemade sauce and lasagna, because we don't eat that kind of food normally. So it was kind of a really fun treat. And we spent an entire day making homemade lasagna, because we'd never, like, but from scratch with the sheets and making it ourselves and making everything. And it was just fantastic. And for us, that was our holiday. And sometimes now and again, yeah, we've gone and traveled locally, but we tend not to do that. And again, it depends on the time periods, because some years has been easier, some years has been harder. Again, it depends on what the boys need and what we have available resource-wise. So no, I've never really felt sorry for myself. And I think that's the thing. I don't think I've come across any parent who home educates because they want to home educate. I don't think I've met one that feels sorry for themselves that they can't buy new things. They they feel happy that they see their child thriving. And I don't know any parent who would feel sorry for themselves because they see, when they see their child thriving. You might feel sorry for yourself if that isn't happening, and that's a different situation. So yeah, I think all the parents I know are totally happy to have, you know, no vacation 1 year, or, no new clothes, or having to buy secondhand everything. And sure, that has changed, but you just make the most of it. You make the most of it and you find the fun in it.
Mm.
And I know a lot of people who like going to op shop, so I don't really see the problem with it.
Well, fortunately, it's very trendy these days too.
Oh, is it?
Oh gosh, yes. I mean, back like when I was a girl growing up, to get something secondhand was really embarrassing.
Yeah. Okay. When I was younger,
Yes.
that's true.
And now it's virtuous.
Oh, yeah, of course it is.
So we've gone through, and I've lived all
There you
through
go.
that transition of it being like that. That's great feedback. And I think if you're moving from one lifestyle to another, it's only reasonable to
It's
expect
harder.
a very rocky transition period, and just reassure yourself that you're going to baby step your way forward. You're going to fall over some days, but you're also going to pick yourself up and move on. So to wrap up the curriculum part of it, it's reassuring to know that you don't have to spend a lot of money on how you teach your children. That's completely doable. What's the next problem then for being financially aware or frugal? So we've got accommodation and everything that happens in a house. What kind of things have you had to address with some of the people that you've seen, and what you've observed? What are people prepared to do when it comes to accommodation?
To be fair, I haven't come across, because once you actually get into it, often what people think they're concerned about isn't what they're concerned about. So when I have spoken with people, not everyone, but for the most part, I haven't really come across that problem. Um, People think they're worried about money, and they are. That's not incorrect. It's that they're maybe spending it in places where they could cut back very easily and not have to worry about rent and food and that kind of thing. Now, I do know parents where it is tight because they're a single parent and they don't necessarily have, um, someone providing an income. It it's and they get clever. Some of them, I have told some single mothers, look, I understand you might not like the ex. I really understand that, but for your child's sake and so that you can home educate, keep that communication in so that he's willing to get on board. Because sometimes you'll get an ex-husband who will disagree with home education, go, well, I'm not going to provide money. I'm not going to, keep providing money because you're just going to, home educate, and I don't agree with it anyway. So one of the things that I've helped some parents with is, please keep the communication. And I know you don't like this person, but if it's for your child, bite your tongue. And you've got to think, the of the end game here. You want your daughter out of school or your son out of school or whatever. So that has helped. Um, I've had parents with worse situations than that, actually, not financial, but worse situations where I think they've only been three parents where I've actually said, you probably need to put your child back in school. And I've hated saying that to them, but they had pretty rough circumstances. So that's why I'm so positive with, I do believe most parents can do it. It's
It's huge.
there are.
I was just going to say it's hugely reassuring to hear you say that, because the default position is what we started with. We can't afford it. You need two incomes these days, Christine. It's not like it was for us. And yet here you are, still living it and mentoring and reassuring young families that yes, you can. So I'm so thrilled, really, to hear that what I was saying to my friend is actually so. So,
Well, one other thing is also,
yes.
again, this comes down to willingness. And I always go back to willingness, willingness, willingness. But let's say you don't have a great paying job. Upskill, upskill, get the husband to upskill one of you. I know families where the wife goes to work because she earns more money and the husband stays home. Fine. They're still managing to home educate, or the wife can't cope with the home education, so the husband stays at home. Fine. But sometimes when people say, oh, you don't know what it's like and you need two people to work. If you upskill, if you're maybe you do have to send your kids to school for a period of time while you go back to school and re-educate yourself. I say school, but you can I know people who've done it without going to a formal school, and upskill and then go back into the world of work, yourself or your husband. Yeah, anyway, just
Mm. It is really reassuring. I'm quite delighted, actually. And with the responses that I've had coming through, I'm going to top up what we've been talking about and just curate the responses that I've had. I've had people messaging me on those message boards. I've had them coming to me privately through Telegram. I've had someone say, look, I want this totally confidential. And I said, look, absolutely. I'm not going to name names. I'll be generic. And I so appreciate what you've had the courage to tell me, because their responses are there to encourage and equip others to know that they too can do this if, and we go right back to the beginning, there's a willingness to do it. Because when there's that willingness, you will find a way. There's only one can't in here, actually, and that is you can't have everything. It's not
yes,
reasonable.
there's a
It's
trade-off.
not, it's unreasonable. It's impractical. It's illogical. It's not real life.
No,
You have
well,
to choose.
what my other half says is there's always a trade-off. So
Yeah.
if you choose this, you give up this, and you have to be okay with it. If I go to the museum, I can't go to the ice cream shop or somewhere else. At that moment in time, whatever you choose, you can't do something else. And so choosing to home educate, you do have to give up. There is a trade-off. It depends on your family as to what that trade-off is, but there will be a trade-off, and that's called sacrifice, in other words.
Mm-hmm. Can you think of anything else that we haven't covered that would be really helpful?
One thing I do want to discuss a little bit actually is a lot of the parents, they who came and said, well, there are all these classes and they're very expensive. So because of that, I started setting up groups where parents would exchange skills, and I would encourage parents to set their own group up, because I've helped other parents do the same thing. A lot of people aren't maybe comfortable opening up their home, for whatever reason. I am. That's okay if you're not. Use the local library. I have used the library for more than one group that I've run. Find a parent who is willing to open up their home, and you just all, find people you trust, or if you want to open it up to the wider community, do so. The libraries will actually forward it if you're using the library, because I used a couple of libraries. They actually posted notices up, and I just had all these new people. I'd never met them. They just joined my group, and I had an engineering group that I set up. It started off as a social group with games, and then we kind of went, well, let's teach the kids problem solving, which is what engineering is. And it was great because the kids actually had to do something a little bit more than just play games. I've had a group where we did calligraphy and Spanish, knitting, botany, anatomy, physiology, and cooking. I mean, we did loads of things. So if you feel that you don't know anyone, you don't have the resources, you can't really afford to, or you don't really want to spend the money on classes, because sometimes you don't want to either, set up a group. And if you're not sure about how to set up a group, I'm more than willing to help someone through that, because it does take patience. When I first set up my one of my groups, I can think of about 4 years ago, I think. We were the only ones turning up to the library, and then one other family, and then that was it. And then sometimes they wouldn't come. And so it was just us. And for me and the boys, I was like, great, okay, let's just sit and do our own stuff. And eventually we had 30 kids turning up to that group. 30 kids. And with the adults there, I think we're looking at about 40 or 50 people in the library. We had so many people that all the other libraries were going, can we have a group like that? Because I think they like the foot traffic. And that was free. The library gave us the space. They gave us if we needed stuff, if we needed paper, if we needed sellotape, if we needed glue, they would provide it. If we needed games, they would provide it. It gave us shelter from the rain. And on a sunny day, if you really wanted to, you could go outside as well. So, and it's all down the road.
That is such an encouraging, hopeful example that you've given, and it's practical. There'll be parents who would never have thought of that, and you've gone and given them exactly a template of how to go about that. That's brilliant. Is there anything else that you want to tag on?
Not really. I mean, the sky's the limit. You can make up whatever you like.
Well, I've got one final
it's
question.
Coming out of that, and I'm going to say school mindset, because parents have the school mindset. Parents that have the school mindset, I have observed that the school mindset comes from the parents. It starts outside the school gates. And so the parents keep that mindset. And if we change our mindset, because the kids actually change faster than we do.
That's so true. Well, I've got one final question for you, Shilpa. If you could time travel and go back to your young self, let's say just as you're coming into adulthood, but also just as you're coming into parenthood or early homeschooling days, and let's think of it from a financial perspective. If you could go back and change something, do something, learn something, what would it be?
First of all, I would probably have never put my children in school to start with.
Finances?
But from a finances, I would have listened to Richard more than I did. I'll be honest, I didn't listen to him. And he was, in fairness, we've both learned, because, we're both younger, starting out. Life was very different. And we both made mistakes on the finances. But he definitely was wiser, and I would have probably learned more, because he's one of those people that loves to learn. So he would pick up books and read them all the time. And I should have learned a lot more about finances and asked more, and questioned him too, but also learned from him, because that's actually what I've eventually done anyway, is follow his lead now, because he is better at it than I am. But that knowledge has to come from somewhere. So it would have been very, very smart if I had actually sat down and learned something according, in my way. Obviously, I'm not like him. I would have probably had to pick up a different kind of book, but I should have still done it.
Okay, good, helpful. Because those kind of reflective remembrances are quite helpful also to people listening. And it's always fascinating hearing what people would change if they could. So, Shilpa, you have been absolutely wonderful. And the word that I've kind of realized more and more as we've talked today is that you've brought hope, you've brought freedom. And I'm so grateful for your input.
Oh, I'm glad. That's really nice to know. And I'm really happy to help. I would love more parents to be able to home educate, because I think, if I'm honest, I think our kids are better off with us, and I would love to see us in a community, just in general.
Amen to
with
that.
Kids who are taught by their children who are taught by their parents than by a stranger.
What a lovely way to end. Be encouraged, parents. You can do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thanks so much, Shilpa. Looking forward to another interview soon.
Yes, and thanks for having me on, and hopefully speak to you soon.
You're so welcome. Thank you.